Anyway, my name is Bob Meacham, and I am one of the directors here at the museum. And again, welcome and thank you all for coming. Today is the first day of our summer season programs, and we have 8 more to go, starting after we're done today, from May right up and through December. And they're all very, very interesting programs. This afternoon, we're going to have a very, very nice program offered by the Pascale family. And I want to give you just a little history how this event happened. Back in late October or early November, Joe Pascale and I were surveying the property for some work that had to be done in the masonry business. And he mentioned that his dad had some original tools owned by Ezio DeSantis, an employee of the Flint Quarry. And that little conversation morphed into the program that we're going to see today. And it's been quite an experience for it. There is so much to be said. This is not a story about the Flint Quarry. That story is told in another area. But without any further ado, I would like to introduce Randy and Joe Pascale, and they're going to take it from here. Thank you.
Thanks. Can you guys hear me without that thing?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm going to read to you some things that I wrote down just to give you up to speed with how the Pascale family ended up here. Because it's centered around the local quarry. This is my story of it anyway. This is the short story of it anyway. The Pascale family settled in Monson on about 1890 due to Salvatore's, my great-grandfather's occupation as a stone cutter. You'll see that on the citizenship papers here that they're passing around. Salvatore bought a farm, aka the Pascale farm, on Quarry Road, which was a few doors down from the Flint Quarry entrance. Freshly quarried granite was among the choice building materials of that time. Granite was abundant and labor was cheap, a match that drove the demand for granite materials as a popular industry during this time. It's important to consider quarrymen were like all other industry workers. Their daily routine was labor-intensive and often as mundane as all other physically demanding careers. Quarry work was not glamorous or a novelty like it is today due to its popularity. It was a supply and a demand industry. There were hazards in American industry. Stone quarrying was filled with its own hazards. For example, the sheer physical weight of this type of stone was dangerous to simply handle at about 170 pounds a cubic foot. So if you think what a cubic foot is, that's not very much. 12 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches, 170 pounds is pretty heavy. That's about what Monson granite weighed on average. And different species of granites can fluctuate from as low as in the 150 pounds per range to in excess of 200 pounds. So that's kind of interesting. You think all granite weighs about the same, but it doesn't. There was a lot of crushed fingers. We're on a daily basis. I know this because I have often experienced it firsthand while I set stone myself in my career. But there were worse injuries as well. Stone splinters that ricochet off stones are lethal, and way more so back then due to the absence of protective gear like there is today. You can't work in a quarry or anywhere without putting on glasses and ear protection and eye protection and gloves and steel toes. So there was a lot of injuries back then. And then in addition, there was a very common and deadly hazard known as stonecutter's consumption, which is exactly what claimed the life of Salvatore in his early 50s. This is stone dust in the lungs, for you guys that never heard of that. Stonecutter's consumption. Salvatore and Angelina had 5 sons and 4 daughters. This is where I would like to share some of my personal experiences that relate to the Monson Quarry and my family's involvement. All right, good. Salvatore had 5 sons. Most of these sons were involved in the local quarry. One of those sons, Roger Sr., had 5 sons himself, being third generation. The oldest son being Roger the second, and he's sitting right over there at 93 years old. And Roger had a son and 2 daughters. That son's name was Randy. That's me. I'm the oldest of the 4th generation. I have 2 sons, 2 daughters, whom are all experienced in this trade, I'm proud to say. My earliest recollections in life are centered around the family business, using masonry materials and tools as my toys to play with. Soon I was old enough to understand this was our way of life. At a very early age, working side by side with my grandfather and his brothers, my father and his brothers, most all my cousins, as I grew. It is during this time I learned firsthand most of the techniques and confidences I use in my career to this day and have shared with my children. Now I think it's time for some vivid memories. Watching my father trace and split some old stone blocks, granite blocks, for the first time. I was about 5 or 6. Watching my father use and build the granite sign base in front of the Methodist Church on Main Street in Monson while I was standing at the bus stop one morning and wanting to work with him. Being on the job sites every summer day with my family talking about the old days when the quarry was in its full operation. One in particular is one morning my Uncle Carmy, who's his daughter's here, Kathy, told me when he was a young boy, he would run over to the quarry and visit his father and I believe his 2 older brothers, Orlando and Ronaldo, which is, Dottie, where are you? There you are. Ronaldo was Dottie's father and Uncle Carmy was Kathy's father. These were my grandfather's brothers, the oldest ones. Uncle Carmy told me in vivid detail one morning while I was working with him on a hot summer morning. He said he ran into the quarry and stood alongside Enzio DeSantis, who was the premier sculptor of the quarry at that time. Enzio was just pulling out all of his tools onto a table like this. Sculptor chisels, hand sets, bowl points, which we're going to show you some of that stuff before you leave if you're interested. So Enzio was just pulling these tools out and to continue carving a statue that he was working on, a World War I soldier statue. The fellow modeling for that statue had just put his World War I coat on and hat. This is in a hot summer morning now. And stood still looking off into the distance when Enzio chopped a couple of small pieces off the statue and stopped what he was doing cold turkey, and he said to Tony, take the coat off and go home. I just don't see you today. I just go home. And then he looked at my Uncle Carmy and looked down at him and winked and said, I just can't see Tony today. And the model for that statue, his name was Tony Alonzo from Monson. Some of you folks would remember that name pretty well.
Yeah.
Tony Alonzo the first. Then there was Tony Alonzo Jr., who was a carpenter for H&L Builders. I knew him pretty well. I didn't know his father's pose for the statue. And then there was a Tony Alonzo the third, who was about my age. I'm 63. So interestingly, Enzio told him to go home, which was what, like I would imagine any artist would, if he's not feeling it, he's just not feeling it, or painting it, or whatever. In this case, he was sculpting it out of with these tools that we have here. I'm going to explain that in a minute. So Tony Alonzo lived just a few doors down the street, up on Margaret Street, and Enzio also lived. His house was the big Victorian that is just south of the Quarry Hill School. I believe that's what it is, Quarry Hill School. That was Enzio's house. There's some granite piers there that he built 100 years ago or so. Is that the way you remember it? Yeah, he's been around for a while too. So that was Tony Alonso that actually posed for that, and the statue now stands on the corner of Main Street and Chapin Street in Hamden, Mass. That's that World War I statue. That was Tony Alonso that posed for it, and Enzio that carved it. It's a work of art. He was a gifted carver. They were few in between. He was held in extremely high regards in this area as a consequence. So Uncle Carmi told me he could still see Enzio's front teeth chipped from the granite bouncing off his teeth. He told me that. I can remember talking to him right now. And incidentally, we own all Enzio's chisels and carving tools bought from a DeSantis family tag sale that my cousin Scott happened to be driving by Pascale. I headed back to the Pascale farm, and this is just a few of them. You folks will be able to take a look at them before you leave. I just want to show you a couple of them really quick. We've got probably, I'm going to say, and they look like dental tools, as you can see, for the finely tuned, and some one for taking off bigger bumps. We'll show you in a minute. We've got probably about 400 or 500 of these chisels because they dulled so fast. Once one just had a little bit of a dull edge on it, he would set that aside and pick up another sharp one, because you have to have sharp tools to cut this type of granite and with precision. And the tools that were dull would just go back to the sharpening shed where they would put an edge on them and temper them and harden them with heat, and after it got heated, they would cool it quickly, and that's how you harden steel. So anyway, we probably have 400 or 500 of these, and that's why, because they just wouldn't keep an edge. That's how hard this stuff is. So there are too many recollections and work experiences for me to mention, but a few notables stick out in my mind. Salvatore's blessing from the Pope for carving crosses for the St. Patrick's Church. And that's what this is. It's a papal blessing to Salvatore Pascale. You'll see I think it's on that, it might say Sullivan Pascale on that citizenship paper, because he interestingly, he spoke with such broken English, they didn't understand he was saying Salvatore. That's been a long running joke in the Pascale family. The immigration department, whoever was processing his paperwork, thought he was saying Sullivan. So that's how he got Sullivan. You can believe it or not. Very interesting. So well, you can imagine back then. So he got this papal blessing for the crosses that he carved the granite stone for at the top of the St. Patrick's bell tower above the clock. So this is good for all us Pascales. We're all going to heaven for this. Perhaps. So the numbers. So some of the notables are that this papal blessing, what Salvatore did to get it from the Pope, the number of years the Pascale men worked and helped and produced all types of granite for the open market in the granite market back for a few generations then. The fact that my grandfather, Roger Sr., died while physically actually cutting a piece of granite. I went to where he was cutting this granite later that day and saw the stone chips and his hammer laying there. He died right in the middle of chopping a piece of granite. So that kind of sends this home a little bit more for our Pascale family business thingy. That was my father's father.
Randy, somebody asked how old.
He was 77, I believe.
Oh, is it still cutting stone? Did I?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
My father's 93. I'm going to get a few more years out of him. So, Yeah, the hammer was like the stone he was working on. So more recently, the number of granite projects me and my children have worked on locally. You folks some of you I know are aware of it because you're from town and you've seen us work locally. We've been really lucky and thankful to be able to do this type of work and have it be in our generations, in our family history. But I suppose that's why we're in it. So anyway, the granite bulletin board in front of the new town hall we designed and built. Well, I was actually cutting stone with a hammer and chisel one morning there on that site down on Main Street. My Aunt Sherry, my Uncle Rennie's wife, stepped out of the front door. I don't know if you remember this.
I do.
And she stepped out. She didn't know where the sound was coming from, but I saw her go like that. She said, "I know that sound." So, and then she came over. Of course, we caught up. The Pascale family has worked on many original granite projects locally for over 100 years. And over 100 years ago, and recently, the most recent generations have worked on restoring these same projects that were originally worked on by our family, which is interesting for us. So, an example, the cemetery wall restorations, entrance piers restoration, hillside cemetery arch restoration, granite bridge restoration, and a couple of the bridges locally that were out of granite, countless granite foundations and restorations, all requiring our own personal techniques and touches. We have worked with many, many different species of granite, all having their own characteristics, which is pretty interesting. A lot of folks may not think that granite can be in the color of green, black, red, pink. You think granite, because Monson is a granite town, you see a lot of granite locally in monuments and physically on buildings and whatnot. And so you might automatically think it's just all gray, but there are some really, really exotic colors and veins and garnets within. But if you first, and I've seen almost as many as you can imagine. And Monson granite's always been my favorite by a long shot with the deep gray. It's considered to be a dark gray. And sometimes with what is called white horses, which is white, what is it? The veins. Yeah, the white veins, but it's quartz that has been mixed in on occasion, and you oftentimes will see a pretty dominant line going through. You think the stone would want to snap on that, but it's actually harder in that part than it is in the rest of it. It's interesting. So, I remember driving to a job site in the city of Norwich, Connecticut, where we cut and set approximately 200 tons of stone that were all sizes like that and this, and we cut and split. My father would, it was mostly me and my father, but a couple of my uncles, and my kids were there as youngsters, basically terrorizing the job site. But they were there, and they did. And one bright sunny morning, off in the distance, across this pond, this was in the Norwich Zoo, which is, I believe, defunct now, for one reason or another. My father was, I was coming back from running for a coffee for us. There was my uncle, my Uncle Roxy, my father, and there was a couple of others. And I was coming back from fetching some coffee for us, and as I was pulling onto the job site, I could look 150 yards on the other side of this pond. My father was kneeling down, and he just was going just like this and hitting the chute. And when he did, a puff of stone dust came up. And I had been doing this my whole life, and I never saw this until that morning. A puff of that stone dust came up, and just like you see in an ocean where a school of fish go one way and you can see them the next way you can't, the sun was glistening just right, and he was in a cloud of stone dust that I could hardly see him in, all from just that. You wouldn't think so, but, and of course that's that stone. And I realized then I better start being a little bit more careful about chopping stone by hand. It was just, you would have had to see it to believe it. It was all glittery 1 second, the next second you couldn't even see it. But he was kneeling in the middle of that cloud. And that's why he's 93 right now, probably. So, very interesting. So, bear with me here. On a side note, my grandfather on my mother's side, Joe Russo Sr., immigrated from the same area of Italy as the Pascale family did, believe it or not. And his father and his older brother Carmine and his father's brother, I don't know his name, were stonemasons, dating back into the early generations of that side of my family. I'm not sure if my father even knows that. He might be learning that now for the first time. All right, so that's about it for that part of it. Hopefully that was interesting to you folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys.
What part of Italy did your family emigrate from?
We didn't really come from Italy. Right outside of Naples.
Oh,
Pardon?
Mundella.
Right.
Mundella.
Yeah, right. It was a province of Avellino.
That's where my husband's family.
Really?
Avellino, yeah.
Geez, everybody comes from there, it seems.
They all came to New England.
Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah. My, a popular way to cut stone is hammer and chisel. Then when bigger pieces need to be split, drilling, we drilled a couple of holes before we came here, just so we didn't bore you guys with that. And back in the day, you would take a, I don't know if you guys can see it, you'll be able to come up and take a look at this, but this has four sides to it that come to a point. It's called a star chisel. And you would start there and hit and turn, hit and turn, hit and turn, and hit to keep going like that by hand. And I always felt like it took forever, but the guys doing it every day, you get handy at it, and it's got to be the right diameter for the right size shims that you guys are going to see. We'll split a piece here in a minute. And so I thought that was the only way to drill a hole. And one morning, my Uncle Carmy again was working. I was working alongside of him, which I really, he was one of my favorites to work with along the side because he was just so easygoing. And he told me that, because I was talking about this drill, getting ready to drill a hole in a piece of stone, and with a star drill, he said, "Throw that thing away." He said, "All the guys, I'd have to find the chisel, but it comes to a point similar to this. It's wide, and it comes down to a point. I forget what the name of it is." And he said, "That's how you really make time drilling what we call shim holes for the wedges and shims." And it was just another thing for me to learn on the fly, that you don't hear unless you're in the business, I guess, with your family and older generations. I wouldn't have known that. I like to think I would have learned, but that was pretty interesting because everybody accepts the star drills as the gospel for drilling wedge holes. And it made perfect sense after that, and it does work really good. Any questions? I covered everything, didn't I? Yeah.
What quarry did you always use?
Lately, so Monson Quarry closed in what? I want to say the 30s, somewhere in there. I don't think it made it to the 1940. And are you from around here?
Yeah.
So do you know where the old quarry was, the old Monson dump it turned into?
Yeah.
My father talks about when he was a kid, it would, of course, these quarries would naturally fill up with rainwater, would be crystal clear. And a lot of times during the summer, the little kids would go and swim in it. And on around the time the quarry was running out of steam. I mean, if you walk up across the field now and look on you can see granite ledge sticking out up 20, 30 feet above the grade in steps. That's basically how they shaled it off. And there's wedges and shims sticking, holes and wedges and shims sticking in the stones. Somebody must have been going like this, and then they got this and said, we're basically, you're all done today. Because, and left. There's shims, feather wedges and shims in a lot of the stones. Pretty neat when you stop and think about it. I mean, because once you get those holes drilled, that's 95% of the work in splitting a stone. Putting the shim in and splitting it is, once you put the shims in, you can just about breathe on it and it'll split. we'll show you. So for them not to continue to split the stone, somebody must have stopped them that's what I get from it. But my father told me that when he was a youngster, somebody threw a bike in thinking it was funny. And then a little while later, somebody threw a tire in. And as you can imagine, bike, tire, then some just garbage, metal parts, and kids thinking they were being funny. And virtually overnight, it became the Monson dump because it was so contaminated that the town of Monson took it over. I believe they leased the property, and I can remember myself in the early '60s driving down with my father, and I don't care if you had nuclear waste on the back of your dump truck, you put the tailgate down and dump it off and drive away. It was, there were no regulations. So, to answer your question, we use a couple of quarries that are native to Western Mass in the Berkshires that have granite that look really similar to this. It's not exact, but it's very similar. There may be some rift in the continental shelf or the mantle that goes from east to west into, once you start getting a little bit further east this way, it's not so predominantly gray. It tends to have a lot of tans and grays, and the tan is nothing more than iron that has rusted. That's why you see tan stones or granites. It's iron that's rusted. So, but we do have some connections up in the Berkshires that are outstanding. There's one fellow in particular. His name is Alan. What's his last name? Williams. That is a master sculptor. In case you folks ever need any sculpting, and you feel like you might not want us to do it, that would be your second choice. And he's been very helpful with us to add on to what we once in a while we'll call him with a question or a challenge, and he is outstanding in his field. He travels all around the northeast. The United States, rather, teaching sculpting classes to different universities. I can't say enough about that guy. Very, very good. So, and then there's some other quarries that we deal with but that's really our go-to because we like that color granite. It's a good stable granite, believe it or not. Some granites are not quite as strong as others. The heavier they are, the more condensed they are, the stronger they are. The lighter they are per cubic foot, the less stable they're considered to be. So, for example, if you put a load on a stone, and it's more susceptible to splitting because it's just not as dense. And Monson is considered to be a pretty good quality granite for that. In regards to that, if I've answered your question.
Did the Monson quarry, did that just play out? It wasn't economical to get?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It did. The way that I understand it is there were other quarries, particularly in the Berkshires, which is out in no man's land today. You drive up there, you don't think you're in the state anymore by the time you get to the one we deal with. It's as far out as it can be away from civilization. But they improved and invested in their techniques and their equipment, automated saws, diamond saws, and their techniques. And that's really the way that I understand. That's because Monson still had plenty of granite. It's just that they didn't stay up with the times, and they couldn't compete with the other local quarries that are in New York's way, and that was really their demise, unfortunately. There was a quarry right at the end of this field, just for an FYI. They were fairly common. Any old farmer, wherever there was ledge sticking out of the ground, in Monson was always considered to be pretty choice material, no matter where it was exposed. You see some down on Hospital Road, headed to the old Monson State Hospital. On the left there, that's a good indication there was some quarrying going on there. But up here, as you take the right to go up to Paradise Lake, if you look, there's an old cart road. It used to be really clear, and open in there, you could see the remnants of a quarry up there, which is really common. Quarries were in almost everybody's backyard for your typical need in that area. But when Monson Quarry, I don't know if you folks, I'm going to tell you another quick story about how the Monson Quarry started, to the best of my knowledge. And you can Google this stuff, but there was a fellow by the name of Swearad, was his last name. He was friends with George Washington's military man, his right-hand man. I'm trying to remember his name. It might have been Alexandra. And that dude needed to build an armory in the Springfield area. And right up on the hill where the Springfield Armory is where they found some land, bought it, and that dude Swearad was friendly with a fellow by the name of Flint, who owned the land up here where the quarry is. And Flint said, "I've got plenty of granite if you need it." In so many words, that's the way that I read a lot of this, and this is what I get from it. And that was really what got the Monson Flint Quarry off the ground with demand, was that Swearad's contract for the granite. And as just so happens, and of course you know the rest of the story with the quarry. It went on until it was the biggest employer in town for a while, and then it fizzled out, because they just were competing with the other quarries. But there was some work going on in the Springfield Armory about, 8 or 10 years ago, and a friend of mine happened to be working on a demolition crew over there, and he called me and said, "Hey, Pascale, there's a whole bunch of granite blocks that we're throwing in the dumpster." Yeah, that's what I said. So I said, "Well, all right, I'll be right there." Some of the most beautiful cubed up chunks of granite, all 2, 3, 4 feet by 1 foot by 2 feet, gorgeous. This was all roadways in that Springfield Armory complex, and inside the Armory buildings was all cubed up for the floors under government contract and they ripped all this stuff out, probably not knowing how nice it was and how stable it was, and because they were renovating that armory for something else, and so there was a fella that owned the ABC trash company down in Connecticut. I guess he's the one that owns the Great Horse in Hamden, and they were paying him to take this stuff as garbage in his dumpsters. This went on for a couple of days before I caught wind of it, and I hired every truck I could find, trucking, including our own, and went there and made a deal with the job supervisor and said, "I won't charge you for this stuff. I'll be kind to you and I'll take it off your hands." So, well, he was very, very happy. It worked out. But they were keep in mind they're paying by weight, by the ton, to get rid of the trash.
Wow.
When that dude that owns that company caught wind of this guy meddling, I got a phone call. We talked on the phone, and he wanted me to get out of that. No, I said no. As a matter of fact, whatever you got, I want. He said no chance, and I'll remember this, is what he said to me. So we probably got somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 or 400 tons of this stone. A lot of it we stored, and we'll use it. It's going to be for generations to come. It's like gold, really, when you work with stone, and you want to match something in this area. Not to mention just how nice it is, just the way that it is. It's absolutely gorgeous. But that's an interesting story from the quarry. If you weren't familiar with, that's how the quarry actually started. If you Google this, you'll be able to see it. It should match pretty much what I'm saying. Any other questions?
Yeah, much of our house's foundation are big, long blocks of granite. And of course, the house was built in the 1860s. So I've always been intrigued by what did it take? I mean, there was no mechanical stuff going on then, so how did they get, what was the manpower, horsepower, whatever, that got all this stuff into position?
Well, first of all, we should get rid of all that stuff for you. And, a lot of it was, as I said earlier, it was all done by hand. It was lent itself to quite a challenge in the industry because of it's just, yes, sheer weight is just. But they had techniques, fulcrums, they had pinch bars, they had, there's some jobs that I can't even explain. For example, down in Boston, I see some, down in the Market Square there, where there's some granite columns that stand up 30, 40 feet. I'm not exactly sure. There was a lot of sweat to it, but cubed up granite in your foundation, like this stuff here, is that stuff there we call man size. Anything up to 150 pounds or so. We were a bunch of heroes back in my day. My uncle Rennie in particular there was nothing that man couldn't lift. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. I saw him do some things that I've never seen from anyone else. I've seen some bruisers in my life. But the even bigger chunks of stone, then they get, you'd be surprised how easy, as long they can get loaded up. They might have a land here at the quarry, they might have a loading dock where they could back wagon up to and roll the stones right onto. And when that's all you're doing, you can be pretty efficient at it. You can roll as many of those on as the wagon will carry and get them to the job site and roll them off and roll them and pinch them into place and line them up. And it goes a lot quicker than you might think. It's all about just what was it?
Getting back to local quarries, the Keep Museum had several quarries on this property. The only one that we know that exists that is only very, very partially visible is at the top of this field back up here. But if you walk around the front of the building, you'll see some massive granite blocks. And they probably came from the Keep quarry. They tried to make it a successful quarry, but it never worked out. The Flint quarry was just too strong for them. By the middle or end of this summer, we plan to open the basement of the other section of the barn. And that is a little bit of a wonder to behold. And I just a little not a trade secret, a little sleeper coming out. The floor of that basement barn is solid granite blocks, the size of the sidewalk blocks out there. And it boggles my mind to know why they put blocks down in the farm basement, and how did they ever get them in there? So look forward to that this coming summer. Just a visual, and we know there's nothing on display down there, but we hope to get it cleaned out and make those blocks visible to see.
Any other questions?
Do you have any information about the rock crushing plant that they had there at the old quarry?
Well, so how do you know they had a rock crushing plant?
Well, it was something of the sort. I think that they crushed the remnants for railroad beds.
Right on, which is really common in quarries because it's refuge. All the chunks that got chopped off when they were squaring up pieces of granite, cubes of granite, they had a lot of refuge. You could go into, and I don't know a lot about Monson's operation with their crushed stone, but I know that it's really an abundant byproduct in all quarries because it's putting good use to the refuge pieces of stone. I just don't know Monson. I'm sure they did have that for these folks. Anybody that doesn't know, Monson, from the quarry that was up on the hospital road, or Quarry Road rather, there was a railroad line through the woods that came down to the center of town, more towards the center of town, onto Route 32, which is now where the was a Monson Medical Center, is now it's a, what is it? It's a vet place, that's right. This guy used to own that place here years ago.
I didn't own it, I gave Mobile a lot of rent money though.
The town thanks you. So, and that was one of the things one of the products they would carry down on rail and dump into cars to go off on the rail, because it came down hooked onto the Vermont Railroad and distributed from there. But I don't know, I just know that all the quarries that we deal with today as well use, sell and produce a crushed stone into processed gravel because there's such a demand for it. So yeah, that's one thing I never really gave Monson Quarry too much consideration, because I'm always thinking about the chunks of granite and what we were interested, my family was interested in.
Well, if you walk back there, you'll notice that there isn't that much remnants left, that it's pretty clean.
Right on.
Whereas other quarries, there's piles of scrap.
Right on. Yeah, that's true. I've seen a number of defunct quarries in my career, and they all have a little bit of a story to tell in regards to what's left there and why. And you're right, I never really saw a lot of crushings from Monson Quarry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah.
No.
Curious, Diamond National, those buildings that are sitting there doing nothing for 10, 15 years.
Right on, they're gorgeous.
Loaded with granite.
Oh, absolutely.
Why don't you go get it?
What's that? Oh, yeah, I'm all over that, sister. My sister. I suspect one day that, I don't know that they'll be rejuvenated, those buildings will be rejuvenated. She's talking about down on the way into Bondsville, the Diamond National, which was a.
Egg carton.
Yeah.
They make egg
Right.
cartons.
I don't know if that's what it was originally.
No, later.
No, I don't believe, right. But talk about gorgeous building, and it's in really good shape because granite wears like iron. There's nothing like it. It will deteriorate, and it does, and it'll turn to dust someday, but there are no other, but concrete has got a very short life expectancy compared to granite. Very short, as you unfortunately know. So, granite is, stone on stone on an old foundation is considered to be the best going, even by today's. It's just that you don't see too many outfits that want to work with it anymore. It's expensive. It's labor intensive. When you can just put up forms and pour concrete in and have a nice foundation for a house, that's today's market. Any other questions? Yes.
Randy, just to let you know, starting in May, there will be demolition of buildings up at MDC. And it's been told, as the buildings come down, that they will relocate the granite foundation in an area of the property.
I'll give him a place to put it.
What I'd like you to do, dear cousin, is to please verify with the town of Monson, because this could be another.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's good information. I like that. Usually we somehow or another find this stuff out as it unfolds, but that's good information.
I have a quick question. Our house is from the 1800s, like many of the ones in Monson, with granite foundation and whatever. That granite, because it looks good to our eyes, was that actually cut for foundations, or it's kind of expensive, or was it kind of like scraps?
Is it if it's split face? That's one of the.
Some is split, you can see the holes.
Right. Okay.
And some just seems to be.
Saw cut.
It just seems to be big.
So,
big.
The Monson Quarry is amongst other. That's one of the characteristics of a good quality granite. It clefts in straight lines, and Monson granite is pretty good quality granite for that. And sometimes if you breathe on it just right, it'll split and nice and straight. Sometimes we have to. This is a piece of Monson granite here. And, but if you read the riffs just right and split on those riffs, you can get a really straight looking, really straight, or, you know, numbers of feet, 8 or 10 feet, you can get a peak before it starts to wander one way or another. Then there are other techniques to try to keep it straight, like wedging and shimming and chiseling and tracing to keep them straight. But in general, when you chop a piece of this granite, it's like, it puts me in mind of salt, because salt clefts in like 3 directions. You know, if you look at a salt cube, most of them are basically cubed, and that's what granite wants to do by nature. Is so it's really, that's another reason why. But when you saw stones coming from Quarry, generally we would call that a rubble stone work.
Yeah.
Not really tooled up square.
Yeah.
When you have like the St. Patrick's Church or other like a lot of the walls down. That's all squared up, and
It has
there's
to be perfect.
well, yeah, they well, some of them do if it's really ornate work,
Yeah.
and some of them you can have that concept, but they can run out of square a little bit. But the next one you make up, the installer knows to make the next one the opposite wedge shape. So this one might be a foot here and 16 inches here. The next one wants to be, you know, to compensate so that you're always creating level beds is really the now you guys know everything I know. But that's really what wants to happen when you're setting stone. And and that stone is, you know, perfect for it. Any other questions?
Randy, nice job.
Thank you. So, you got anything you want to say? Pardon me? Yeah, we're gonna just split a couple of stones here real quick. Now, keep in mind, you guys,
Block your eyes.
there's no guarantee, I mean, we're gonna do what we typically do, and usually when you work with this stuff, that's another thing. When we work with this stuff, anybody that does tends to learn really, really quickly what not to do, because you don't wanna ruin the stock, because it's expensive. So. This is one of the apparent heirs. Leo.
Hi, Leo.
What do you want? Different size wedges and shims. I'm going to hold them up so you can see. This is a wedge and shims. And they got a little bend on them. Usually we break them off oftentimes into use, but it wants to be like a 90 degree. So, but you can see it gets thicker as it goes down. So when you put it in the hole, this L shaped on the top will hold it at the top of the hole, so it won't fall all the way in. And so these have been used so many times that we have to hold them in place while we're putting the wedge in. But you got a wedge and 2 shims that create as you can imagine, create a splitting effect once you drive the wedge down into the shims. And something like this, it doesn't take an awful lot of pressure to drive these shims in and for the stone to split, particularly if you're with the grain.
Those metal things?
Yes. Yeah. We're gonna put that on the floor. Here, have Uncle Joe help you. It doesn't take a lot. Yeah, when you're doing it, you wanna keep them in concession. You wouldn't wanna drive one all the way. Is it split?
Yeah, it's split here. We want to try to chase it with
You got it.
to make sure.
Catch up.
Because if you just pound on this one, it'll snap.
Right.
You know, it would just snap off here.
You tell them, Leo.
Yeah.
They don't always behave exactly the way they're supposed to, but there you go. Just remember, folks, I taught him everything he knows. And it's as straight, pretty straight as you can see. That's a beautiful stone. Oh my God, it's gorgeous. There you go.
Is that a standard width, or does it depend on the stone?
Well, it depends on what you're looking to make up with the stone that you're cutting. You know, a stone veneer in front of a building is generally considered to be about 4 inches in width. That might not be. This was just a piece of stone we had laying around because we didn't want to take any really good stuff in. Because we knew what we were cutting it for.
In between the holes,
Oh, I see. Yeah, you mean the distance between?
whether it's 4 inches or 6 inches or.
So, the thickness of the block of stone that you're looking to split, and you can have a stone this thick and do that, believe it or not, with those shims, believe it or not. You don't want to rush it. It takes a little bit longer. You want to tap them in and really snug and let them work a little bit, and then repeat that process over the course of some time. It doesn't want to go as quick as this if you want it to split straight. But then,
I don't think you want to hear about right now, that's right here.
I forgot what your question was.
It was just the width in between the.
Yeah, so you would, that spacing right there is pretty common. And it's all with the installer, like us, when we were drilling it, we were confident that that's all we needed for that to split in that thickness there. You might, size of the stone. Right, the size of the stone. We might put them a little bit more close together if we were looking to get a truer or a straighter split. And we would also go down the sides with it too. So it really pretty much has to behave. You know, it works. In general, the granite really does want to behave. That is Monson granite. As you can see, it's got the white. I keep wanting to say mica. There is a little bit of mica in it, but there's also quartz. What's that? Yeah, right. This isn't Monson granite, but this one, we've got all kinds of species at our shop, but. I should have brought some, we had some red, pink, and all kinds of. This one is actually another very popular one native to Western Mass is Chelmsford Quarry. The St. Thomas Church in Palmer is made out of Chelmsford granite, and it's got a lot of mica in it. When you split it, it actually looks like it's got hair sticking out of it because it's the mica. If you've ever broken a piece of mica, and it's and other than that, it's similar looking to Monson granite in a dark gray color. And I think that's it. Unless you want to chop one of these, go ahead. Why don't you? I'm gonna have my man demonstrate one more. Do a trace around the middle of that. Right down on the floor there. I'm gonna drop it on my dough. Here, use your. tracing.
You can see the puffers.
And that's all we can afford to do is use just one cobblestone and bring, because we couldn't bring any more.
Yeah, I tried.
He's tracing, and he's gonna trace around, right around the perimeter a couple of times, and then, just want to show you how,
See if that was on something solid.
just to give you some idea, yeah, it'd be nicer if it was on a soft ground. It wouldn't bounce so much, but as you can see, he's tracing it. And that's about what it took back in the old days to trace a stone so that it would snap on the trace line.
About how deep do you have to go? Quarter inch?
No, it's, I don't want to say it's superficial, but because it is, we're interfering with the structure of the stone, but it's, but, the more you trace it, the more it wants to behave. Exactly.
Wait, is it spark?
Oh my God!
So that makes a nice split face for a corner on a wall or a chimney or something, or anything. And that's it. As you can see. Okay, folks.
Thank